Okay, guys, now I'm going to show you how to write a winning contract. Okay, so in another video, I showed you how to actually get to the purchase contract. That was just simply the process of getting started to get you to the point where you would be writing the contract. Okay, but now I'm going to basically go through what it takes to write a winning contract. Just so you know, during our 3-day boot camp, I go over this and very thoroughly. So this will be more of a crash course through it, but this is more for the for you guys who are right now thinking, okay, I've got a buyer ready to submit a contract. I need to submit a contract, and these are the steps that you need to take. Okay, so number one, before we even start, I want to explain to you the 3 things that you must do before you start writing this contract. Number one, and we will do this in a different video, is you should comp the property. So in other words, whatever the price it says on the listing, we don't know if that's a good price for the property. And the way that we'll find out is by doing a comparable search and figuring out exactly what the property is worth, right? Because sometimes these sellers lose their mind. So your buyers want to put in a contract, but the property could be overpriced, and we need to know that, right? So number one is we're going to do a comparable search. The second thing we're going to do is we're going to call the listing agent. Okay, why do we do that? We call the listing agent because we need to find out if there's any other written offers on this property, if we have some competition, or what's been going on with it. Sometimes you'll find that a property that you're looking at had some weird things happen, like it got put under contract and then it fell out of contract. Whatever the case may be, it's important that you have a conversation with the listing agent prior to filling out this contract, because we need to know the whole story. What's going on with the property? You know, is there any issues with the property? Have you gotten a lot of activity? Do you have written offers? If so, you know, try to find out where those offers are at. Can you tell me where those are? What do I need to do to put in a winning contract? So these are the conversations you're going to have with a listing agent prior to writing this contract. And then number 3, you're going to have a talk with your buyer. So based on what you comped and based on what you found out from the listing agent, you're going to talk to your buyer and say, how much do you love this property? I have to show you what we need to do to get it. And by that point, you'll have enough information to direct them. So here we are, we're at the contract. Let me show you what the important things are to fill in on this contract. Just so you know, this is a 12-page contract, but there's only probably about 15 places we really need to focus on. So I'm going to show you those places, okay? So number one, this came from a video that I just did. So we have the seller is called Way Cool Homes LLC. You'll see that I don't actually have a buyer's name here. If you would have watched the other video and you would have inputted the contacts correctly, you would have had your buyer's name in here. So obviously, we can just put Bobby Davidowitz, which is me, in here. Okay. Okay, but obviously you have to have the actually, just to teach you a lesson, you have to have the legal name in here. So if we were putting the legal name in here, you would put Robert A. Davidowitz. Okay, that's my government name right there. Okay, so you'll see if you imported all the information, your address is here, your legal description should already be in your contract. Okay, this section here, so notice this. All the lines of this contract are numbered. So if I refer to a line of a contract, this is what I'm talking to you. So if I want to talk to you about line 20, this is where you would look, okay? You'll notice that there are some of these lines have little asterisks next to them. They have asterisks because this is an important line. So this is a great guide for you if you're ever looking at the contract and trying to figure out, is this an important place, okay? I'm stopping in this section, which is a personal property section. So this section actually says all of these items in the house are included in the purchase unless you tell me they are not, okay? So all these items are included. So if you look here, included is the range or the oven, refrigerator, dishwasher, disposal, ceiling fans, intercom, light fixtures, drapery rods, draperies, blinds, window treatments, smoke detectors. Basically, anything attached to the property should come with the property. So in other words, you know, you can't go ripping out chandeliers and lighting fixtures and things like that. That is assumed in this contract that it's coming, including appliances such as the refrigerator, the oven, and things like that. Now, if there's anything else that is included in this purchase that's not mentioned in here, for instance, most of the time it will be something like a washer and dryer. A lot of times a seller will take that with them. So if they are including it and they say, no, we're going to leave it here for you, then you might want to put that here because it says other personal property items included in this purchase are, and you would put washer and dryer. Okay, this is often listed in the listing, but we cannot depend on another agent to do this right. So this is something that I would ask, especially if you're walking through the property and your buyer sees the washer and dryer and it's brand spanking new and it's really cool washer and dryer and they're like, oh my God, I love this. Make sure you check with the listing agent if that's actually coming with the home, because as of the contract, the way it's written, it's not included in there, okay? Now, here in line 23, it says the following items are excluded from the purchase. So if there's anything that is actually in this first paragraph that they say, no, we're actually going to take that with us. Let's say it's a really expensive refrigerator that they bought and they want to take that with them. Well, if that's the case, then we're going to say that the refrigerator is excluded from the purchase. Okay? Am I spelling that right? Yeah, I'm spelling that right. So that's where we would do that. Okay? Often, you rarely run into these things. It's just something I'm bringing light to, because I don't ever want you to forget it and then have somebody say, I thought the washer and dryer was coming with it, and then they're on your case, okay? So let's get to some more important stuff. Line number 26, very important, the purchase price. Okay, I've already spoken about this, right? So how do you know what the purchase price is going to be? Number one, you comp the property. Number two, you called the listing agent and found out the story. And number three, you talked to your buyer about how much they want the home and what it's going to take to put in a winning contract. So if I was in a competitive situation, I might have to offer full price or even over full price sometimes to win it. If a property's been on the market for over 100 days and they haven't got any offers on the table and, the property needs a little bit of work, well, I can actually offer a lot less than what they're listing it for, because I feel like I have some leverage there, okay? So in the example in the other video, I had 1.2 million. So let's go ahead and leave an astronomical number in there. Oh, actually, let's just go something more fitting. So let's go to 350,000. Okay, so that's our purchase price right there. Line 27, initial deposit. Okay, you have to put a deposit down in order to solidify this contract, okay? Very, very minimum on any purchase has to be at least $1,000. It's not a rule, it's just a standard, okay? But here's the deal. $1,000 on a $350,000 purchase is really kind of low. And the deposit, although the buyer can get this deposit back, and I'll show you how they can get it back, right? Even though they can get the deposit back, it shows how serious the buyer is. So in other words, if you put a low deposit, you're basically saying, hey, I'm not that serious about this purchase. You put more money in, you're saying I'm really serious, and by the way, I have the cash in my bank, because the deposit is actually going to have to get taken out of the buyer's bank and put into an escrow account or a holding account that the title company will have. Does that mean it goes directly to the seller? No, it's just a holding account until closing. It will be applied towards closing costs and down payment at the end. It's not a fee, it's a deposit. It's just basically a way to lock down this contract. So on something like this, on $350,000, if I wanted to show somebody I was serious, a lot of people have different rules for this. If you say, some people say you got to put at least 1%. If we wanted to put at least 1%, then we'd put $3,500 as a deposit. Okay, you could do that. I think in something like this, you could probably get away with $3,000 and be okay. Okay, but there's no hard and fast rule besides the fact that, just so you know, this is how serious your buyer is about buying it. So let's say I was in a competitive situation and I knew there was other offers on the table for this $350,000 home. Well, you know what I might do? I might just say, hey, you know what? I'm going to put a $5,000 deposit and make mine look better than the other ones, or even go crazy and put a $10,000 deposit. It just depends how bad you want, right? Okay, so moving on. Let's go to line 29. 29 here, there's a lot of places in this contract that if you leave blank, it'll default to something. This is one of them. So if you don't fill any of these boxes in, it says if left blank, then 3 days. So basically, this is saying that the initial deposit, or that $5,000 that I have here, needs to be in the title company in 3 days. Okay, so this is not something you want to wait a week for or anything like that. If you're going to show a seller you're serious, you need to get this to the title company. You can get that deposit to the title company by actually written check, or you can have your buyers wire that money to the title company. Okay, moving on. Line 32, this is where you would put the title company information. Many times in the listing, in realtor remarks, they will actually have what title company the seller has chosen. The seller traditionally chooses the title company, so it should be on the listing if they're a good agent, but are many people out there great agents? Probably not. So sometimes you have to call and ask who the title company is. That said, if time is a factor, let's say you're competing against other offers and you're trying to get this contract in within the hour, I would not hold up this contract waiting on a title company. So if that were the case, I just put TBD, here to be determined, and move on. This is not that important to me or to them. You can always figure out who the title company is, okay? Not a big deal. So let's move down to this section here, line 38, another asterisk, so it must be important. Okay, so now this is where we put what amount we're financing. This is assuming you are getting financing. So this is assuming you're getting a loan. So if you're getting a loan, how much is the loan for? So you can either put the amount that you're borrowing, or you can put the percentage that you're borrowing. So let's say, for simplicity's sake, it was a $100,000 home, and I was getting 80% financing. That means I'm getting an 80% loan, which means $80,000 would be my loan amount, or 80% LTV, or 80% loan to value. So if my loan amount was $80,000 and I was buying a $100,000 home, my LTV is 80%, my loan amount is $80,000, right? So you can put either of them here. In this particular case, we're talking about $350,000. So let's say I was putting down 20%, right? So my loan was 80%. Then I would just go here and put 80%. And you see this number here, it just changed. Watch what happens when I take it out. It says here, funds to close, balance to close, $345,000. All that's doing is it's subtracting that $5,000 deposit and saying that, hey, the amount you have left to bring to the table is $345,000. Well, that's not actually true, because I'm getting 80% financing, which means I only have to bring $65,000 to the table. Just so you know, this line 41, this funds to close, does not include closing costs. This is just has to do with your down payment. So this is what it's saying. This is what you have remaining for your down payment to bring to the closing table, plus you'll have closing costs on top of that, okay? Now, let's say I wanted to actually do the amount. What's 80% of $350,000? Let's do that real quick. That's $280,000. So I could also do $280,000, and boom, the same number pops up because it's 80%, same amount. Okay, moving on. Line 45. So line 45 is actually the time we are giving the seller to accept our offer. This is not a deadline that they necessarily have to meet, okay? So don't freak out if you gave them till tomorrow and then the next day passes. Now, doesn't mean you don't follow up with them. Of course not. But all this is you're giving them a time frame and saying, hey, this offer is valid until tomorrow. And after tomorrow, technically, we can back out of this offer we made, okay? So in other words, this protects your buyer more than anything else, rather than makes a hard and fast deadline for the seller, because, you know, not everybody is going to answer you as quickly, and sometimes you'll be presented with an offer with a time frame and you won't meet that time frame. But here's the deal: as long as the seller still wants to sell and you still want to buy, as long as they sign the contract, you can move forward. So this little date here, I usually put for the next day. So I would put it for tomorrow, April 9th, and I'll give them to tomorrow to sign it. Now, what happens if it passes tomorrow? Well, if it passes tomorrow, and let's say my buyer says, oh, you know what, I like another house, you know, let's forget that house, then we are no longer bound by this contract because they didn't sign it by the time frame I gave them. That's really the protection of this day. I usually give them to the next day. You can do the same. If you're, Gil Ramos, he'll give you till 5 p.m. that day. Okay, you can do this however you want to do it. Once again, it's not a hard and fast deadline. It's really more to protect your buyer in case your buyer finds something else and they haven't signed the contract yet. Okay, moving on. Line 52, closing date. Okay, this is very important. So if you're getting financing, okay, the typical time you need to close a deal that has financing, a deal where you're using a lender and getting a loan, is about 30 days. If you're getting an FHA or VA loan, it often pays to give yourself a little bit more buffer, maybe 35 days, maybe 40 days, depending on the situation. If I'm in a situation and I'm competing for a property and there's multiple contracts and I want my contract to look the best, I might want to call my lender and say, hey, I know we're getting an FHA loan, and those usually take a little bit longer, but can you make sure you can close this in 30 days because I don't want to put a contract past 30 days. So that's really important because, you know, the way your contract looks is important, and your contract will look better if you're closing faster. That said, if you're getting financing, I would not go under 30 days. I think you need that full 30 days in there, okay? So in this particular case, let's just go ahead and put the closing date since we're on April the 8th right now. I'm gonna give myself an extra little day because I'll pretend like I'm getting conventional, and I'll go ahead and put it for May 9th. So that's when my closing date will be for this particular example. Okay, so let's move down here. Okay, I'll only mention one thing here in line 68. You will only check this box if the property has a renter in it and the renter is going to stay after you purchase. This usually only happens if an investor is buying a home. So if an investor is buying a home and there's a renter in there and they have a lease, then you're going to want copies of those leases and all that paperwork, and that's what this box says. Most of the time, you will not have to deal with it, so we will move on. Line 77, very important here, assignability. Okay, what does this mean? Assignability actually means the ability for you to take this contract and actually assign it to another person. So this you will see many times in something called wholesaling. So this is an investor tactic where you can actually put a property under contract, okay, and then you can find somebody else who wants to buy the property for a higher price and actually flip the contract to them, okay? But here's the deal. If you're dealing with a traditional buyer, you don't want to flip a contract. You're not trying to do that. And if I were to click this box or this box, which actually allows me to assign this contract, it's going to look bad to a seller, okay? A seller doesn't want to know that you're going to be selling this off to somebody else, that you're not the actual buyer, because it's a little bit riskier for them. So for traditional purchase contract, where you're dealing with a traditional buyer who's moving into the home, you're going to want to click may not assign, okay? That won't raise any red flags. It's the real deal. You guys are buying it. You don't have the ability to assign it, okay? Moving on. This section is very important, okay? We've got the financing section, okay? So this section is where we tell them, okay, are we buying this property cash or are we getting a loan on this property, okay? If you're buying the property cash, you're going to want to click this. And if you're buying it cash, okay, up here, you're not going to have any financing amount. So you wouldn't have any financing amount up here because you're buying it cash, right? You're not getting a loan, okay? One thing to note about this financing section here on line 82 is that just because you click this box doesn't mean you can't get financing. All it means is that you can't back out of this contract because of financing. So in other words, let's say you click here and say, okay, I'm gonna pay cash. I might get a loan, but I'm not worried about it. Well, guess what? Let's say you try to get a loan and your loan falls through. You can't go back to the seller and say, oh, I'm sorry, my loan fell through. Can you give me my deposit back? The seller's gonna be like, nope, you clicked right here that you were gonna buy cash. Or if buyer obtains a loan for any part of the purchase of the property, buyer acknowledges that any terms and conditions imposed by the buyer's lender or CFPB requirements shall not affect or extend the buyer's obligation to close or otherwise affect any terms or conditions of this contract. Basically saying, hey, if something falls through, if you click cash and something falls through with some financing, you better be able to buy it cash or you're in trouble, okay? So most of the time, though, you will probably be dealing with somebody who's getting financing. So we must click this box. This is the financing box. Okay, this contract is contingent upon buyer obtaining approval of and you got to put the type of loan that you're getting. Okay, this is an important little section here. So if it's conventional, great. FHA, you can click that. Okay, if it's an FHA loan or if it's a VA loan. Okay, so let's say for this example, it's a conventional loan. Okay. So the rest of this is one of those sections here where if we leave it blank, it defaults to something. So this line 87, while it might not look like a big deal, is a very big deal. This is your first protection right here for your buyer. First protection in the contract for your buyer's deposit. This little blank right here is super important. You see that right here it says if left blank 30 days. What it's saying here is that you will have 30 days to make sure your buyer's financing is good, that you're approved, that your appraisal comes out, that everything is fine. If within that 30 days, though, something goes wrong, maybe your buyer does something stupid, like go buy a car in the middle of trying to get a loan, or takes out 15 credit cards, or their credit score drops unexpectedly, whatever happens here, okay, if it's within 30 days, you can submit a cancellation for this contract and receive your deposit back, because this financing, this 30-day protection here, protects you with anything financing related, including appraisals, including anything having to do with their income. They might get fired in the middle of this, whatever it is, that's financing related, okay? You can back out, get your deposit back. So make sure that you don't have to fill this in, actually, because it actually defaults to 30 days. I usually don't go past 30 days because it looks bad to a seller. That's a long time for you to be able to back out. So 30 days should be fine. Leave it blank, or you can fill it in, up to you. Okay. The only other thing I get specific about in this section here is I click fixed. It asks you what kind of interest rate. Are you getting a fixed rate or adjustable rate? I just put fixed. Everything else, don't worry about for now. You can leave blank. It'll default. And you should be good to go here. Okay. So we're going to move on. Okay, so this is the closing cost section here. There's not much to do here, but this actually does explain what each side is responsible for at closing. The only thing I want you to focus on here is line 144. Just make sure you include the admin fee. Here at the company, we charge a transaction fee of $299 or admin fee, whatever you want to call it. Make sure you put that in there under your buyer section, because if not, then you're going to have to pay for that. So this is a cost we pass on to the buyer. This is very standard, but I'd like to put it in here. So I'd put admin fee $299 right here. That way they can't say you didn't tell them. But there'll be other disclosures where you disclose this, but I like to put it in here also to alert the title company that there is an admin fee as well. Okay, moving on. This section right here, 158, 162, we have to click 1. And all this says, guys, and they make things sound really complicated, but basically this is saying who's choosing the title company and who's paying for the owner's title policy. That's all it is. Here in Central Florida, the seller usually picks the title company and they usually pay for the owner's policy. So we're going to click seller shall designate closing agent. By the way, guys, closing agent is the same as title company, is the same as escrow agent, the same as closing agent. 3 names for the same thing. They're talking about the title company here, and you see that the seller should designate closing agent and pay for owner's policy and charges. Okay, this is not a bad thing. Most title companies are the same as far as fees, or close enough. So the seller takes on an extra expense. If you click this, no big deal. Just put, boom, click seller shall designate closing agent. Good to go. All right. So the next section I'll talk about briefly is 173, which is the home warranty. If you are asking for a home warranty is a protection, usually lasts 12 to 13 months, where you pay $500-600, and this covers your things like your AC and appliances and things like that within the home. If your buyer is buying a used home, this is not a bad idea to at least talk to them about getting a home warranty. Now, the buyer can choose to buy this home warranty on their own, or we can actually click here and ask the seller for it. Okay, so we can ask the seller to pay for it and tell them the amount that we're asking them to pay for. A cost not to exceed $500, let's say, if I wanted to do that. Okay, now, is this required? No. Do a lot of times people don't put this in here? Yes, a lot of times people actually don't put anything in here, and leave that out and just put not applicable. Okay. It is really up to you. I have gotten burned on this one time. A friend of mine bought a home and their AC went out a few months later. It would have been good to have a home warranty. I think this is something that should at least be discussed. You can make the seller pay for it, or you can just tell the buyer, hey, it wouldn't be a bad idea for you to get a home warranty. Okay, moving on. This section here, 183, 185, I'll go over it briefly. I usually click 185. So this basically talks about special assessments. So if something, for instance, if the county or the city is putting street lights on your street and they're asking all the neighbors to pay a little bit extra fee every single month, like an installment payment to pay those lights off, then this section is saying basically who's responsible for that. Is the seller responsible for those installment payments prior to closing, and now the buyer is going to be responsible for that after closing? Or should the seller pay for all of those installment payments all in one lump sum so that the buyer doesn't have to pay anything? Okay, I click the buyer doesn't have to pay anything. The seller shall pay the assessments in full prior to or time of closing. Okay, this is not a big deal. You will almost never get fought on it by anybody. It's just B is better. It protects your buyer more. If for some reason a listing agent makes a deal about this, just ask them why. Is there a fee that's being paid? What's the deal? And then clarify it. And then if we need to change it to A, we can change it to A. But for now, let's just put B. This is the way that I do it. I suggest you do the same. Okay, so moving on, we'll keep scrolling down here. You'll see there's all this legal stuff. Oh, now we're to this very, very bold section right here. This is probably the most important section of the contract, okay? Line 249, okay? If you look right here, it says property inspection right to cancel. Okay, what does this mean? This is the part of the contract where we give your buyers the most protection for their deposit, okay? We're gonna do an inspection period which gives the buyer time to inspect the property. We're gonna give a certain amount of time for us to do the inspection. But here's what you need to know. It's not just time to do an inspection. And it's not just time to do an inspection, and if you find something wrong, you can back out because of the inspection. You need to know that this inspection right to cancel actually allows you to back out of this contract for any reason at all. You don't even have to give them a reason. If you do it within the time frame that you specify in this contract, you can back out because you didn't feel good that day. You can back out because your buyers had a fight or whatever the case may be. It doesn't matter. You can back out for any reason at all. I suggest you read this paragraph thoroughly so that you understand that. But in this line right here is where you put how many days you're giving your buyer to inspect the property and or cancel for any reason whatsoever. Once again, if you leave it blank here, it says if left blank in 15 days. We don't like to do a full 15 days because that's a long time. I mean, if you're thinking about a 30-day closing time and then 15 of those days your buyer can back out for any reason at all, that does not look good to a seller. And to be quite honest with you, you don't want to give your buyer that much time. What if in day 11, they just wake up in a bad mood and say, screw it, I'm not buying this thing anymore. Then their deposit will not be at risk and they can back out for any reason at all. And, you don't really want that. You really want to give them enough time to inspect the property, make sure that everything's good with the property, and then negotiate anything that might have to be fixed. So here's the deal, guys. Do not let this inspection period run out without making sure that you've negotiated everything you need to negotiate as far as any repairs or anything like that, okay? And make sure that you have it in writing before these 10 days are up. If not, we can talk about it a little bit more about what you do in the circumstance when you're running out of time and you haven't resolved issues. All I will say in this video is make sure you put these dates for this inspection period and also for your financing contingency in your Google calendars, and give yourself a 2-day reminder before these things end so that you're not surprised by them. Because if you pass the inspection period without, and there was a repair that needed to be made and you didn't have it in writing and those 10 days are up, and you go back to that listing agent and say, we want to give you an addendum now saying that, you're going to fix, this thing for $1,000, they can say, nah, too bad, you passed your inspection period. Sorry, you can't tell us to do anything. Okay. And then your only protection to get your deposit back from then on would be if something fell through with the financing. Okay. Hope that makes sense. You guys can always ask me more questions. So let's keep going here. We're almost done, guys. We're almost done. So let's keep scrolling. Okay, we're almost to the end of the contract. I'll stop here at line 569, section 19, addenda. So addenda just means what addendums are you attaching to this contract that we need for this deal, okay? The most common ones you'll see, for instance, if the property has a homeowners association, you'll want to click homeowners association because you're going to attach a homeowners association disclosure, which says what you have to pay to the homeowners association. If it's a condominium, okay, they have obviously a condominium association. Basically, homeowners association and condominium rider are the same thing. It's just one's for a condo, one's for a house, okay? So if it's a house, homeowners association. If it's a condo, condo rider. Okay, so you could use that. If you're happen to be getting FHA financing or VA financing, you're going to want to click this. There's a required addendum that you will have to have for that. Another one that is commonly used is an appraisal contingency. Appraisal contingency is another addendum you might use. Let's say you're getting a conventional loan and you don't know if the property will appraise, or you think it's going to be close. You might want to just put that in there, although an appraisal is a financing situation. So for instance, if appraisal comes in low and you guys, you and the seller cannot agree on what to do, then, you could always cancel the contract based on financing as long as you're within those first 30 days of financing. However, it's always good practice to include an appraisal contingency if you have a conventional loan, because it's just an extra protection saying, hey, look, there's going to be no discussion as far as if the appraisal doesn't come out, then we can back out or we have to renegotiate. That's all the appraisal contingency says. The reason I say on a conventional loan and not an FHA and VA is because this FHA, VA, and financing addendum actually includes an appraisal contingency. So you don't need to have an extra document for that, okay? So for this one, since we're not doing an FHA loan, it's a conventional loan, we'll unclick that. Appraisal contingency, I'm cool with that. Let's assume it has a homeowners association. I'm cool with that. The other one that you'll see a lot that you'll need to add is this one right here, lead-based paint disclosure. Okay, so if the home was built before 1978, you're going to want to add the lead-based paint disclosure. Once again, don't get too caught up in the addendums right now. This video is really so we can get you to the point where you've written a really nice, tight contract. I will help you out with anything else as far as other addendums are concerned, okay? Moving on. Finally, additional terms, okay? So this is really the last section that we really have to talk about in the contract. Line 571, section 20, additional terms. So this is where you would write in anything that is not already included in the contract that you want to make sure that is included in the contract, or something that has to be done for this purchase. 99% of the time what you would be writing in here, if anything, because realize that when you start writing stuff in here, you're essentially becoming a lawyer, and you got to be really specific and smart about what you write in here, because you will be bound by it or your buyer will be bound by it, okay? But 99% of the time what you would write in here would be if you're asking for closing cost help. So if you're asking the seller to pay for your closing costs or pay for part of them, this is where you would tell them that this is what you want, okay? So every time you write something in this contract, I want you to start with the phrase buyer and seller agree, okay? And then whatever it is you're gonna write, okay? In this particular case, let's go ahead and do it like we're gonna ask for closing costs. So let's say buyer and seller agree that seller will contribute $7,500 towards buyer's closing cost and prepaids. Okay, this would be the verbiage that you want to use. Okay, buyer and seller agree that seller will contribute $7,500 towards buyer's closing costs and prepaids. I try to be very specific so they can't say that I didn't tell them exactly what we wanted. This is what you'll usually put in here. If there's something else you need to put in there, we will probably talk about it over the phone or in person. We'll make sure we get it tightened up. This is a very general explanation of what needs to be done to write a winning contract. Guys, remember that your buyers will have to sign the bottom or initial the bottom of every single page. You'll see buyer's initials, buyer's initials, buyer's initials. Okay, they'll initial everything, and then on this final page, they're going to actually sign and date, and they'll also initial the bottom as well. So initial every single page. Sign the last, make sure your buyer signs the last page. And the way this would work is once the contract is done, you would send it over to your client, usually to sign digitally. You send it over to the buyer. Once you receive the signed contract from the buyer, you take that, the PDF of the signed contract, you attach it to an email along with your pre-approval letter for this purchase. So your pre-approval letter from the lender. And usually I make sure that the pre-approval lenders state specifically the price that I am offering. So in other words, if I'm offering $350 and they were listing it at $360, I don't want to give them a pre-approval for $400 to let them know I could have offered them more. I want to go ahead and give them a pre-approval letter for $350. So I'll attach this contract to an email signed by my buyer along with my pre-approval letter, and I will send that email over to the listing agent, letting them know that they're receiving an offer for their home. And if we want to get more detailed into different situations, we can do that in person. But now you know how to write a winning contract, okay?